I used to think I had control over my life. I thought I could make my own choices, live freely, and avoid the consequences. But now, I know better. You see, I was like any other young girl, full of dreams and hopes. But somewhere along the way, I strayed. It all started with a single night. The kind of night you don't think much about until years later when it comes back to haunt you. I remember the night clearly. I was sitting in my room, staring at my phone, scrolling through social media, looking at people I didn't know, pretending like I had a perfect life. But inside, I was empty. I hated the life I had at home. It was too strict, too controlled. I had to follow the rules, church on Sundays, prayers every night, and I was expected to be a good girl. But I wasn't good. I wanted more. More excitement. More freedom. I wanted, to feel special. So, one day, I made a decision. It felt small at the time, but it was the start of everything. I met a man at a party. He was older, charming, and he looked at me like no one ever had. He told me I was beautiful, something that no one had ever told me. At first, it was just a few drinks and some dancing. But the more I hung out with him, the more I started to feel different. He said things like, "You can have anything you want. All you have to do is take it." And I believed him. That night, I made my first choice. I left my morals behind and followed him. I didn't know where I was going, but I felt alive, like I was in control. But that was the first lie he told me. It all started with a text message from a friend, Sarah. We hadn't spoken in months, and suddenly, she reached out and invited me to a party. The message was simple: "Come out, Amina. Live a little. It's time to let go. You deserve to have fun." At that moment, I knew this could be my chance to break free from the life I was stuck in. I'd spent too many nights listening to the rules, and I was ready to ignore them. I texted back immediately, my excitement bubbling over. "I am in." I didn't tell my parents, of course. They wouldn't have understood. They always warned me about the dangers of going out too late, about the kinds of people I might meet. But I didn't care. I was done listening to them. This time, I was going to make my own decisions, regardless of the consequences. When I arrived at the party, the music was blaring, the crowd was loud, and the air felt thick with energy. I felt a rush of freedom, something I hadn't experienced before. People were laughing, dancing, drinking, and no one seemed to care about the rules. The atmosphere was intoxicating. I could finally be myself, well, the version of myself I thought I wanted to be. At the center of the room, I saw him. Kenny. He was tall, handsome, and had a way of commanding attention without even trying. His presence made the whole room feel like it was spinning around him. His smile was warm, yet something about it felt calculating. He approached me almost immediately, like he had been waiting for me to walk through the door. "Hey," he said with a smooth voice that sent a shiver down my spine. "You're Amina. Right. I've seen you around." He already knew my name. That was the first red flag, but I was too excited to care. "Yeah," I said, trying to sound confident. "You are Kenny. I run a few things around here." He gestured to the party. "But I noticed you're not quite like the others. You've got something different about you. Something rare." His words made my heart race. No one had ever said something like that to me before. I'd always been the quiet, shy girl, overlooked by most. But Kenny saw me. He made me feel like I was special. I'm not really into all this stuff, I said hesitantly, gesturing to the chaos around us. I'm just here to, have a little fun. Kenny laughed. Well, tonight you can have all the fun you want. You just have to know how to play the game. I didn't understand what he meant, but I was intrigued. I followed him around the party, listening to his words and trying to ignore the voices in my head telling me this wasn't a good idea. But the thrill of being wanted, the thrill of finally stepping outside the box, drowned out the warnings. As the night wore on, Kenny's words became more persuasive. You deserve better than what you've got, Amina. You don't need to live by the rules. There's a whole world out there that's waiting for you. All you have to do is take it. That night, everything felt like it was within my reach. Kenny promised me everything I had ever wanted: money, freedom, excitement. He told me that I could live a life of luxury if I just followed his lead. I didn't know what that meant at the time, but I trusted him. I thought I could handle it. It seemed harmless, and he seemed like the kind of person who understood me. Later that evening, I went home with him. I didn't even hesitate. I was lost in the fantasy of it all, the idea that I was finally free. But that was the start of the downward spiral. I woke up the next morning in a luxury hotel room I had never imagined stepping foot in. The sheets were crisp, the room smelled fresh, and for a moment, I forgot where I was. But as the fog of sleep lifted, reality hit me. What had I done? Kenny was still asleep next to me, his breathing steady. I sat up, trying to remember how I had ended up here. The night before was blurry, a mixture of flashing lights, loud music, and his voice telling me that this was what I deserved. But what was this? I wasn't sure, but I was in too deep now. Kenny stood beside me, waking up with a smile that seemed too perfect to be real. "Good morning," he said, his voice soft. "How do you feel?" Confused, I replied honestly, sitting up further. "What happened last night?" "I don't remember much." He chuckled, reaching out to touch my shoulder. "Don't worry. It's nothing you can't handle. This is just the beginning, Amina. You have potential. You can have everything you want if you just learn how to play the game." The words hit me like a slap. The game. I didn't even know what that meant. But something inside me wanted to believe him. I wanted to feel special, wanted to be the girl everyone talked about, the girl who had it all. Kenny continued, "I have a few friends who can help you get started. Trust me, you'll be making money before you even realize it." That was the moment I made my choice. I told myself I would do just this once, just to see what it was like. I told myself it wouldn't be so bad. But looking back now, I can see how wrong I was. The money started to come quickly. Clients were willing to pay for my time, my company. At first, I thought it was harmless, just a bit of fun, a little extra cash on the side. But the more I did it, the more I realized it wasn't just about the money. It was about power. And the power felt good. As weeks passed, the lifestyle became my new reality. The parties, the money, the attention, it all started to feel normal. The clients were polite and respectful, and I kept telling myself that this was just a business transaction. But deep down, I knew I was losing something, my self-respect, my dignity. I tried to ignore the nagging feeling in my chest. I had never felt so empty before. I had always been taught that love was the greatest thing in life. But now, love seemed so far away, so unreachable. Instead, I felt like a machine, performing my tasks without feeling. My life became about how much I could earn, how much attention I could get. But then, one night, everything changed. It was a typical evening. I was meeting a client in a hotel room. I didn't think anything of it at first. But as soon as I walked in, I knew something was off. The man was older, much older than the usual clients I met. His eyes were cold, and his smile was more like a sneer. He didn't speak kindly, didn't even pretend to care about who I was. He just wanted one thing. And I was there to give it to him. That night, I should have listened to my instincts. I walked into the hotel room and froze. The man who greeted me wasn't like any of the others. His eyes were cold, calculating, and he didn't even bother with small talk. There was no charm, no warm smile like Kenny had shown me. This man wasn't here for anything other than what he wanted. I tried to smile, but my heart was racing. The whole room felt wrong. The way he looked at me made my skin crawl. But I convinced myself that I could handle it. I had been doing this for months now, and it wasn't like anything was truly dangerous. I had done this 1,000 times before. "I'm not here for the usual," he said, his voice low. "I need something else from you." My stomach turned. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "You'll see," he replied, a smirk creeping on his face as he closed the door behind me. He started with his demands, asking me to do things that made my insides twist. The words he used, the way he treated me, it was nothing like the encounters I had been involved in before. Every part of me screamed to get out, to run away. But my body was paralyzed. I had no choice now, or so I thought. The money he offered me was more than I had ever seen, but the price I paid went far beyond what I had imagined. The experience felt like I was no longer in control of my body. I didn't just feel used, I felt invisible. This wasn't just a simple exchange anymore. It was something that left me broken in ways I couldn't even understand. When it was over, I left the hotel room as fast as I could. But the damage had been done. I didn't just feel physically exhausted, I felt like a part of me had died that night. I didn't know it then, but my trust in the system I'd built for myself was shattered. And what followed would haunt me for much longer than I anticipated. Days passed, and I tried to push the memory of that night to the back of my mind. But it kept creeping in, popping up in my dreams, in the silence of my room. I kept telling myself that I was fine, that what happened didn't define me. But I knew, deep down, that I wasn't fine. Something had changed within me. The guilt ate at me. The emptiness inside seemed to grow with each passing day. But I kept going. I couldn't stop. Kenny was still around, still telling me that I was destined for greater things. And the money, oh, the money, was so tempting. It felt like I could buy anything. I told myself I could stop whenever I wanted, but the truth was, I had gotten so used to the power, the control, and the feeling of being wanted. Then came the first signs that something was wrong. My body didn't feel right. At first, I ignored it. Late nights, alcohol, stress, of course, that could cause a few issues. But the discomfort didn't go away. I started feeling nauseous. Then, I felt pain. The cramps weren't something I had ever experienced before. They were sharp, constant, and they started affecting every part of my day. I kept telling myself it would pass. Maybe it was just a phase, a result of my lifestyle, I thought. But deep down, I knew that something was off. And as the days wore on, the symptoms got worse. The next time I met a client, I felt a sick knot in my stomach. I didn't want to do this anymore. The idea of being touched again, of giving myself away in exchange for money, made me feel repulsed. But I couldn't stop. Kenny was waiting for me to show up. I couldn't afford to disappoint him. And as much as I hated myself for it, I went through with it again. I told myself I was doing it for the money, for the life I had become addicted to. But inside, I was starting to break. One day, I finally gathered enough courage to go to the doctor. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The pain was unbearable, and the thought of something worse happening scared me. As soon as I walked into the clinic, I felt like a fraud. Who was I, standing here in this sterile white room, pretending that I was just another woman seeking help? I tried to hold back tears as I told the doctor about my symptoms. He asked the usual questions, whether I was sexually active, if I had been in contact with anyone who might have had an infection. I couldn't hide the truth any longer. Yes, I said quietly, I'm sexually active. I'm in this lifestyle, and it's been affecting me. The doctor nodded and examined me with care. He didn't seem judgmental, but I could feel the weight of shame sitting heavily in my chest. I wanted to run, to disappear. But I had to know what was wrong. After a long silence, he spoke. Amina, you have an infection. It's treatable, but if left untreated, it could lead to something more serious. You need to take care of yourself. The relief I felt was almost instant, knowing that there was a solution. But then, I thought of Kenny and the clients. I thought of all the times I had ignored the warnings, all the nights I had convinced myself it didn't matter. But it did matter. It mattered so much more than I realized. I returned home that night feeling like I was carrying a ton of bricks. My body wasn't just hurting, it was breaking down. The infection was only the beginning. I had started to feel like I was losing control of my own life. But I couldn't stop. The money kept coming in. The life I had built felt too good to throw away, no matter how damaged I had become. But the guilt didn't go away. I could hear my mother's voice in my head, Amina, you were meant for something better. Don't throw it all away. I could see my father's face, full of concern, telling me to stay away from people who didn't have my best interest at heart. The more I ignored their voices, the more I realized how much I was failing them. How much I was failing myself. One night, I decided to stop. For real this time. I told Kenny I was done. But it didn't go as I expected. He laughed. You think you can just walk away, Amina? You think this life doesn't have consequences? The anger in his voice startled me. You owe me, Amina. You're too far in now. You'll never get out. His words hit harder than any I had heard. The realization was sharp and sudden. Once you're in this life, there's no easy way out. The people who run it don't let you walk away without paying the price. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. I packed my things and left. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to get away. And so I did. Leaving Kenny's world wasn't as easy as I had hoped. I thought I could escape, but the scars were already there. I didn't just have an infection in my body, I had an infection in my soul. I had given myself away too many times, and now, I was paying the price. My body was damaged, my heart was broken, and my future was uncertain. The path I had chosen was one I couldn't easily erase. But the most difficult thing of all was that I couldn't talk to anyone about it. My family would never understand. My friends, what friends? I had lost them all when I chose this life. Still, I clung to the hope that there was a way out, that I could rebuild my life. It wouldn't be easy, but I had to try. I had to fight for something better. But for now, I'm left with the consequences of my choices. Every day is a reminder that life doesn't always go the way we want it to. Sometimes, the price of our decisions is too high.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell so we can bring you more amazing stories.